If you want to publish a book, but you feel stuck, out of time, and you don't know what to do next, then it's time to finish the damn book. Here's your host, Susie Schaefer.
Welcome to this episode of Finish the Damn Book. I'm your host, Susie Schaefer. My guest, Tim Jacobs, has written 16 books, fiction and nonfiction, one poetry, and over 450 articles in various newspapers, magazines, and e-zines. His writing background is biography, history, and horror fiction. His work has appeared in such publications as Lighthouse Digest, Gulf and Maine, The Connecticut Nutmegger, and Cape Style, to name a few. And in one title featured on C-SPAN 2 TV for his writing of the Civil War. He is the founder and former editor of the Patriots of the American Revolution magazine and has been a freelance writer for over 40 years. Jacobs taught classes on writing and self-publishing and currently is the owner of JWC Publishing, a complete editorial company that offers clients editing, proofreading, and ghostwriting. We've written, as JWC Publishing, he's written ghostwritten bestsellers, JWC Publishing has ghostwritten bestsellers, worked with New York Times bestselling authors, and has connections to a handful of hybrid publishers. And he's the co-owner of Our Legacy Books and the co-founder of the Academy of Ghostwriting. From 2018 to 2025, Tim and his wife lived in and traveled full-time in their RV up and down the East Coast, spending time in New Hampshire, New York, Vermont, Tennessee, and Florida. They now reside full-time in Tennessee. Welcome, Tim.
Hey, thank you. Thank you for having me on here. First, I just want to say I absolutely love the name of your podcast. That says it all right there.
Thank you. That was actually going to be the original name of my company, was Finish the Damn Book Already. But I thought, no, I don't know if my mom's going to like that. So I changed my company name to Finish the Book Publishing. And then when I decided to launch this podcast, I was like, it has to be Finish the Damn Book. Right? You work with a ton of authors with the editorial services, but just in so many different ways. When you wrote your first book, what was that like? Was there anything that was emotionally challenging or frustrating for you when you first published?
I think definitely just being at that time a first-time author of something of a more lengthier project versus just like a short newspaper column or just a short story trying to get it into a fiction magazine or publication. That was definitely a challenge because something I've never done before. And I really didn't have anyone I could tap their shoulder and say, hey, how did you write your book? Can you kind of help me? And this is going back to the mid 90s. I mean, there was no internet. The internet like literally just came out and it was mostly just chat rooms. There was really no, you can't do a search for Ben Franklin and get a whole biography on him. That stuff just wasn't available at the time. I think for me, it was, when do I stop researching and start writing? It was a nonfiction book on the history of the Goodspeed Opera House in East Haddam, Connecticut. I was the first one to research the Opera House and write a full-length book on that place. And I think that was pretty much the challenge because every time I would dig through papers or go to a different historical society, here's a couple more little facts about it that I definitely want to include in there.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because a lot of people don't realize how much research goes into writing, especially if you're talking about historical fiction or even with your legacy books. Like when you're writing about their own personal experience, you still have to go back and do some research about what was going on in the world at that time.
Exactly. You even want to add little things like I always try to, sometimes you could look up what was the weather on such days in 1950 in Maine. Was it rainy? Was it hot and humid? Was it snowing? Because that little element right there kind of puts the reader more into the story because they're going to feel cold or they're going to know what a hot, humid day feels like. And that just adds to the story. And you definitely want the historical aspects to be correct. You don't want to say something like when the Civil War ended in 1868 because it's wrong. It ended in 1865. So you want to definitely have your facts straight. And when people are doing such a thing as an Our Legacy book, they're doing this from memory. And this could be like 40, 60 years ago, a memory. They're a little fuzzy with days and maybe certain people who might have been there. And it's important just to kind of really flesh those facts out just to keep their story from going off the rails.
Yeah, and I like what you're talking about, setting the scene, because very much storytelling, whether it's a memoir or even a nonfiction book, it's important to set the scene and create the tone so that you can show versus tell, because that's how we engage readers. When did you first really learn about that coming from a journalistic background?
Yeah, I was definitely doing journalism a lot. And I think it was just my love of fiction and especially writing, I mean, horror fiction mostly, but being able to take it's a different talent to write fiction than it is nonfiction. But if you do both, you can definitely take elements and processes from each and marry them together. And I kind of say, like, creative nonfiction. Well, that doesn't mean you get to make up a whole bunch of lies. It's
Right.
just you could tell the story a little more colorfully than you would of just straight fact, 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 fact. And it's more like a checklist versus immerse the people in the story. Like I said, if you can, have them get there in the weather. How big is the crowd? A little, even just 2 sentences of the history of the building that they're in, where a meeting's taking place, just gives a little bit of atmosphere to what you're writing.
How do you think that your own personal writing has changed over the years as you've changed careers and done different types of projects? Did you have any aha moments?
I think writing is like any type of practice, whether it's music or doing painting, sculpting. The more you do it, the better you get. So obviously, my book 16, I knew a lot compared to my first book. So obviously, each book gets a little bit easier as you learn stuff. But I really wouldn't say an aha moment, but when Scrivener came out and I was introduced to that, once I learned the curve of figuring out that software, that is a huge difference in your writing because now instead of having multiple windows open because I'm looking at this online, I have 2 or 3 Word documents open, pulling stuff, I'm cutting and pasting. Scrivener has it all on one screen. You could see everything you're doing and you
Mm.
don't have to flip between screens. And I'm sure you probably had this, speaking of like multiple documents. Someone's like, hey, I've written a book. I'm looking to get a quote for editing and maybe a book cover, whatever. Can I send you my book? Sure. It's 40 chapters. Okay. And then you get an email and it's 40 attachments because they did one file for each chapter. And I'm like, what? Why didn't you just send me your floppy disks? I don't understand that. Word, you can fit 10,000 books in one Word document and still have room left over.
Oh my gosh, I love that so much. And it's happened to me too, where yeah, I get an email with all these attachments and I'm like, oh.
Yeah.
So then you have to go back to the author and say, this has to be combined. I've actually done the combination thing for an author, a couple authors that maybe were not as tech savvy, basically copy paste it out into one Word document so that it could actually go to an editor and say, okay, we need a quote on this.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about some of those technical aspects. And maybe for our listeners, we need to kind of back up and talk about what are the different forms of editing and how do you best explain that? Because I have to expect that when people come to me to work on their book, they know nothing about the publishing industry. I have to just assume that these are going to be new terms for them. They don't know what different types of editing are like. So can you break it down a little bit for our listeners so they can understand what are the different types of editing?
Sure. I think one thing that you said there, they're presenting their document to you and they understand it needs editing, but a lot of people are still old school where they think editing is crossing the T and dotting the I.
Right.
And then you get into all these different things, and they're also told by their spouse, their brother, their best friend, like, this is a good story. Like, you should get this published. And they don't realize a lot of it is, I mean, I've had fiction stuff sent to us where there's zero dialogue for 50, 60 pages before someone even says hi to somebody else. And it's like, oh my, and to try to explain that to people and get them to see, it's hard because they're seeing, hey, I get the story. I understand it. Of course you do. It's in your head and it's in your heart. But when you're trying to relate that to someone else on paper, that's a challenge. But in most cases, the first some people say there's 3 edits, there's 5 edits, and a lot of that could just depend per project. But in most cases, you're going to have a developmental edit, and that's where someone really goes in. And in fiction, it could be plot holes in the story, it could be your timeline is How could a person be 10 years old in 1980 and then 30 years old in 1990 when only 10 years have gone by and they aged 20? So it's just all those kind of things need to be looked at. And then in nonfiction, it could be a little bit of doing fact research and just always try to find someone who maybe has a little bit of background. If it's a military book, find someone who was in the military and now they're doing editing and publishing and they have a better grasp of that content, that lingo, things of that nature. After that, then there's what people call line edit or copy editing. That's where you're kind of getting down to the nitty gritty of that's the person looking for commas, they're looking for missing periods, they're making sure a sentence isn't missing a word, because that can make, if you leave out a negative word, that totally changes the sentence. I didn't mean to do that. I meant to do that. That's two different total things right there. That's going to mess up your story if it's not caught and corrected. And the last one would just be proofreading. And mainly that's just like a last set of eyes just to make sure nothing got by the editor, nothing got by the author. And also after the book has been typesetted, just to make sure paragraphs didn't bump or there's a blank page inserted out of nowhere, because that going from one software to another, things can go a little bit wonky and they could point those things out as well.
Yeah. I think that one thing that people don't realize is that you can, especially in a nonfiction book, you can actually impart stories of experience, whether it's your client experience, your own personal experience, that actually can make a nonfiction book so much more engaging to the reader, so that those stories demonstrate what it is that you're trying to teach or engage the reader in. So talk a little bit about that. Like, what are some tips that our listeners might enjoy for nonfiction in particular?
Yeah, I mean, you definitely want examples and stories in your nonfiction. Human to human, I mean, that's what we do. We love to tell stories. We love to hear stories. It's why we read books. It's why we go to the movies. It's why you have friends and family to hear about their vacation, hear about their day at work, whatever it is. It goes all the way back to the cave people. They sat around a fire at night. What did they do? They told stories. Maybe they only had a few words, but they told a story. So that's extremely important because that's where you make the connection with the reader. Even if you're writing a book about financing and this is how you get your first home and these are all the steps you need to do and have all your ducks in a row, give them example. Here's Bob and Sally. They're a young married couple. They're both 24. They're going for their first house. Tell us what happened. How they got rejected in 10 different places. How were you the one that was able to secure them the finance so that they could put a down payment on their house and move in and start their family and they have their first home together?
Yeah, I think that's really important. And that's how we connect the learning with stories that help us remember those lessons and the learning process. So it's fascinating.
Well, that's true. They're going to remember that story of Bob and Sally and getting that house than probably the content and the facts that you put in that chapter.
Exactly. Yeah. And I like that you talked a little bit about movies too, because one of the things that I use as an example for people that are in the writing process is to really think about it in terms of the way a movie is set up. The scenes are set up. I use Saving Private Ryan as an example in so many instances, because in that movie in particular, that first scene of the beach, when they're landing on the beach, it either makes you want to get up and walk out of the theater because it's so graphic, or you are compelled to sit there and watch the full 2+ hour movie because now you want to know, how did they get there? What happened? Right. So by starting your book in the hook that's going to grab that reader, and then going back and saying, okay, how did we get here? What happened along the way? And you can even do that with a nonfiction book too, because that pivotal moment in someone's life as to why they decided to start a business or why they decided to just upend their life and leave corporate America. Who knows what that moment was, but that's what engages the reader to keep them reading.
Yep. Well, I was going to say, even fiction, nonfiction, and even TV shows like 48 Hours and Cold Cases, what do they start? They start with the dead body. They start with the missing person and what they did just 5 minutes before they vanished. And then they work their way back telling the story. And like you said, that's the hook. Who's this person? Why did they die? Why were they there? What were they doing? Who killed them? And that's what you're hoping to find out by watching that program or reading that book.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that a lot of people think that it has to be in a linear fashion. And that's one of the biggest mistakes in writing. And something that I see time and again with when the book goes to editing is that they'll say, okay, this is great, but it's too linear. And so let's take some of that and let's take that pivot moment in the book. Let's put it at the front. Let's then take the reader back through how we got here, because it does feel like it keeps somebody reading, keeps them turning the pages.
Yeah. Yeah, I kind of cringe when someone sends a manuscript. Oh, this is my memoir. And it starts out, well, I was born in 1952 in Portland, Maine, and my mom and dad did this, and I had two brothers. And I'm just like, oh my God, tell me what happened that this memoir is about. We could, chapter 3 and 4, we can kind of get where you were born and when and the background of the family. We don't need that on page 1 through 5.
Absolutely. I mean, I think you could do a whole masterclass on memoirs,
Yeah.
honestly, especially since you're writing these legacy books. So tell me a little bit about the legacy books, what those are about.
Yeah, it's funny because normally, as I know in publishing, particularly in nonfiction with business people, it's who is your book for? It's for a reader. That's the end user. And that reader's looking for, I need to solve an issue that I'm in, a situation that I kind of backed myself into. Maybe your book can supply that answer, that process, and how to get out of it. So you always want to know who your book is for. The Our Legacy books are who is your book about? It's not necessarily for anybody. It's just about who you want to kind of preserve. So it could be veterans. It could be people who founded a charity. They founded a foundation. It could be the story of how your grandparents met. It could be the history of the local firehouse, which was established in 1885. And I mean, it literally could really be about anything. And the whole thing of the Our Legacy was just to kind of, what I say is just to have a short memoir for those on a short budget. Because to do a business book is that's could be tens and tens of thousands of dollars to depending on what that particular business owner needs. The people that just want to tell the story of how their grandparents met, they can't shell out $30,000 for 20 copies of the book they want to put in everyone's stocking at Christmas.
Right.
So we put it, myself and another publisher, just put this whole idea together and put a team together that really are giving their talents of whether it's ghostwriting, editing, layout, and everything, literally for like next to nothing, just so we can offer that to those people. So it's not fair to be like, oh, I have a great story. Do you have 30 grand? Nope. Next. It's just not fair to them.
Yes. And I think that's a very good point, that our services have to be on some type of sliding scale so that you can actually come to the table and say, hey, we can. I was just talking to another person that I actually volunteered my time to publish her book. I said, you've got to cover the cost for cover and interior design. However, I will volunteer my time because I think this is important to get this book out. And it's about a woman who is sharing her legacy, right? And so, and I work with a veterans group as well, veterans writers. And I've always said, hey, when these people are gone, their stories go with them unless we publish them.
Yeah.
So it's really important, I think, that we get those legacy books out. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, it definitely holds its own space in the publishing world. But I think this is important.
Yeah.
There's maybe people out there that don't think that the grandkids or the grandkids of somebody is going to care about that story, but somebody will. So if we don't get it published, it's going to disappear.
Yeah. I mean, when I'm in networking circles and you have like that 30 seconds to stand up, introduce yourself, I say, hey, look, regardless of your family dynamics, you were born with 2 parents, 4 grandparents, and 8 great grandparents. How many of you would love to have at least one book from one of those 8 grandparents that was about their life, of where they grew up, how they met, their schooling, whether they were in the service, the first car they got, whatever? Almost every single hand goes up. And I'm like, good. Don't be like your great grandparents, because there's never been a time like there is today where it's easy to get your book written, get your book published, and you could do it at a very reasonable cost. Your great grandparents didn't have they didn't have this opportunity to do that. The best they could do was handwrite in a journal, and hopefully it gets passed along.
Yeah, because honestly, independent publishing has only been around for what, 15 years ish now?
Yeah.
Maybe a little more. But now, today, it is so easy to be able to work with somebody like you, especially for a legacy book, and get it published and have it be out there. Once it's out there in the ethers of the internet, it's there forever. So it's so cool that you can help people do this. I just think it's pretty amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I say self-publishing your own book has been around for years. Like Ben Franklin used to self-publish his books. And I think what happened was once we got into Amazon and they created this leg, used to be called Create Space, now KDP. Once that was born, that's when the floodgates opened, because now it was literally little click on the mouse, I'm a published author. And the problem with that is people were skipping all these steps. They weren't formatting, they weren't getting book covers, they weren't working with editors, they had no marketing skills or anyone to help them. And they're just thinking, hey, my book's on Amazon. It's great. I'm a published author. And it's, yeah, but who's finding your book if you're not marketing it? And who's going to want to read your book if it has repetition in it and it's out of order and there's just misspellings and everything? So,
yes, and I can remember, I think the industry has gotten better because people are using professional services to publish. But I can remember at the beginning that people were just slapping up their book, writing it at midnight, and by 6 a.m. they have it published. And I was like, oh dear, this is a problem.
Exactly.
Yeah, very interesting. What type of faith-based or spiritual experiences have you had working with authors, and also in your career, just changing over from being more of a journalistic writer to working with people on legacy books?
Yeah, I would say it's kind of like there's a blessing there with a thin line, because the blessing is I'm getting to meet some people that just have extraordinary stories, whether it's a business story or a personal family story, whether it's they went through some type of trauma or they went from like rags to riches. And I'm getting like probably 90% of their story, whereas maybe only 60 to 70% of their story actually goes between the covers of what the readers are going to get. So I'm really privileged because I'm kind of getting like a private front row seat to like some, just like I said, just some amazing stories. But that thin line is you get the people, especially if people had some type of traumatic thing, whether it was some type of abuse or major divorce or whatever, then all of a sudden it's like they start thinking of you as their therapist because they're talking it all out.
Right.
And it's like you got to take a step back and be like, look, I understand you want me to help you or give you advice, but I'm not a licensed therapist. The same way I can't tell you anything medical because I'm not a doctor. I can't give you legal advice. I'm not a lawyer. I can empathize with you. And then in my head, I'm like, okay, how do I push the story forward? And I just start saying, so after you got through that, what did you do? After that phone call, what did you do? After you assessed the situation, what did you do? And I just try to get them past that little bump because I'm in no situation to to dole out any advice.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because in many of the experiences with me working with authors, I've realized that so many people go through the healing process when they're writing. And sometimes when you're working with someone who for years they have not thought about healing the trauma or what has happened in their lives. And I say the same thing too. I'm like, I'm not a therapist, but there are many times when I've had to talk people off the ledge to get them to actually finish their book, because they get blocked. They get author exhaustion, which is going over the manuscript many times. And so, sometimes you're like, okay, but it's our job really to continue to move it forward.
It's funny. That's something I'll ask an author. I'm like, do you enjoy reading? And they'll be like, hopefully the answer is yes. I've had some no's, but usually it's, yeah, I love to read. Okay. How do you feel about reading the same book about 25 times in the next 6 months? Because that's what you're going to be doing with your manuscript at every stage, especially if it's a ghostwriter's in helping you develop and get it to the finish line. And also with the editing and proofreading all the way through, you're going to get that hard copy in your hand and you have to read it yet one more time to sign off on it. So it's like you need to be prepared that you're going to be reading that book in your sleep.
Yeah. And I think that's why, too, going back to the editorial process, it's really important to have a proofreader when it's time for the proofread, be a person who has not seen this manuscript yet, that they're seeing it from with fresh eyes, because there are so many things that our brains will actually correct for us and we miss things. It happens every time. Like we basically get to the end of the process. We order a print proof, also called a press proof. We order a print proof. The author goes through it and says, oh my gosh, I can't believe I missed this. Oh. And they're just blown away that there's a typo or a word that's incorrect in somewhere in the manuscript. And I said, no, that's actually normal because your brain makes those corrections. And when you see it on a screen and when you actually see it in a physical book, it works differently. So yeah,
Two different things.
it's very normal. Yes. Yeah. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what else you do with authors and like let's shift into intuition. When did you use your intuition or maybe not use your intuition? And what was the result of that?
Wow. One thing that came to mind was when I did my first book, which was the history of the Goodspeed Opera House in East Haddam, Connecticut. And again, I didn't know what I was doing, but I sold over 2,000 copies in 3 months,
Wow.
which is just amazing. And keep in mind, this is before there was no Facebook. There wasn't even MySpace. I had nowhere to blast this. It was all me just kind of hitting the ground, feet on the ground or whatever. And I also got featured along the shoreline of Connecticut where the Opera House sits. Myself and my book were featured in over 17 publications, newspapers and magazines.
Wow.
And what I would do is I would get, say, the Hartford Current, and I would look through that and see who's doing most of the entertainment columns and stories. And then be some guy named Rick, and their phone number would be there. And I would call up and I'd be like, hey, Rick, yeah, I have a story lead for you. Would you be interested in interviewing and doing photographs of this guy, Tim Jacobs, who has written the very first book on the history of the Goodspeed Opera House? Oh, yeah, I would love to have that story. Okay, I could have him meet you at the Opera House at 1 o'clock today. Yeah, that's fine. And then I'd go to the Opera House. I'd be like, are you Rick? Yeah, I'm Tim. I was told to meet you here.
I love
And
that.
I would get a whole story, sometimes front page or a whole half page in there somewhere, versus spending $800 to $1,200 for an ad where people are just going to flip by it.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm getting all the advertisement for nothing.
That's so
And
cool.
that's what I would do. And my intuition was, I have something here with this Opera House book. It went like hotcakes. And now, maybe not intuition, but in hindsight, was I should have used that first book to sell my second book and gone to other opera houses in Connecticut to say, this is what I did for Goodspeed. I'd like to do it for you. I funded the Goodspeed book, but I could have now this opera house. They got, most cases, they have 10, 20,000 members who support them. They easily, back then in the 90s, they easily could have shelled out 5,000 or 6,000 or even less to get a whole book done. And I could have done that. And I could have ended up being like, oh, Tim, he's the guy known for doing the opera houses in Connecticut, writing historical pieces on them and giving lectures and presentations on them, being featured in newspapers. Anytime there's a renovation going on, hey, Tim, can you give us some history of the opera? Sure. And I could do all that off the top of my head. And I don't know why, I just kind of froze and just didn't take that step.
Interesting. Well, I always say that there's no mistakes. So maybe that wasn't meant to be because you were actually meant to do the work you're doing now through legacy books and working with authors and the Ghostwriting Academy. Like there's so many things that have expanded your life and your role in the publishing industry. So maybe that wasn't your path. Maybe,
yeah.
Oh, who knows? Maybe that's when you retire. Who knows? Who knows?
Sadly, that's not too far away.
Yeah, I'm hoping you're going to be around for a lot of years because I really enjoy working with you.
Yeah, we got a lot of books yet to do for sure.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you want to share with our audience?
One thing that a lot of people, especially first-time authors, maybe don't get, and it's advice I think that needs probably to be spoken about more or put more out there in social media or circles of writers groups, is when you get to that editorial process, it is so important to take your time. That is not a rushed process. And I've seen some people where the editor takes 2 weeks with it and they're changing words, pointing things out, questioning things, doing this, and they send it back. And the author literally clicks accept all and sends it back. Okay, that was good. I'm done.
Yeah.
And it's like you didn't even read half of the stuff the editor pointed out and asked you questions about.
Right.
And it's not, it's not that simple of a process. This is your book, whether it's to drive your business or it's fiction to entertain. You need to look at every single thing that editor point out and ask, what does this do to my story? What does this do to my book? Do I accept it or reject it? They have questions, answer it. I mean, we're there to help you, but you need to take your time. It's not just click all and accept.
That's so true. And I think that is another point in that process where I talk about author exhaustion. They're just so tired of looking at it that they just like, okay, I'm going to click all. But really, there's probably comments in there. There's something that the editor is saying, this doesn't make sense to me. Can you explain this? Or I need a little bit more detail in this. Or is it supposed to be this word or that word? Like, let's make sure that we're clear on that, because what happens is the result that happens if an author doesn't take that final step, and you got to go at this is a marathon, not a sprint, right? But what happens is if you don't do that, then when you get the printed book, you're going to be like, oh, that's the wrong word. Or someone is going to leave a review that asks for clarification on this specific area, or makes a comment about, well, I really didn't know who this person was in the book, right? You don't want bad reviews. And so you've got to take those last few steps. You've got to see it all the way through, because otherwise you're going to end up having to do rework, and that costs more money. So it's like,
and I tell the authors, there could be bad reviews about your story. That's fine, because people have that right to be like,
sure,
I didn't like the characters, I didn't like where the story took place, whatever. That's fine. They could rant all they want. But if they're giving you bad reviews because of editing and plot holes and things like that, those are all 100%, or maybe at least 99.9% preventable.
Yes.
And the only 1-star reviews that I hate, and I wish Amazon would just get rid of them, are the people who they received the package and it's ripped up and it's torn. I'm going to give you a 1-star review because my package was damaged and the cover was ripped. That has nothing to do with the author or the story or the editing.
Exactly. And you know, Amazon, if you're
eliminate those.
Yeah, Amazon, if you're listening, please make sure that you have AI available.
They have the algorithm to catch it.
We know you have the algorithms. So just start deleting those reviews that talk about the package being ripped, or
those need to go to customer service is where those need to go.
Or a book that arrives with the cover of the actual book and the interior is the wrong book. We've had that happen too. And if you're listening to this and you're leaving a review like that, please don't do that.
Yes. Exactly.
It's really hard on the authors. Really hard.
Yeah. And it's not fair because it had nothing to do with the author or their publishing team or anyone else that was involved on their book. It's just not really fair.
Yeah. And that's another point too, is that there are times when authors will get not so great reviews. And one of the things that I teach my authors is, look, it's going to happen. Just, you got to let it go and move on, because we can take even a paid review from a reviewer has come back and had some not great overall. The review wasn't great, but you know what? I can usually excerpt a good snippet out of those reviews, something that at least we can use. But yeah, if you get negative reviews, you got to just let it go, move on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've definitely worked with authors too, who, let's say they have 20 reviews, 19 of them are 5-star, one's a 1-star. And then they dwell on that one review that's the 1-star. And I'm like, no, you need to dwell on the 19 5-star reviews you got, not that one Yahoo that was just like, I didn't like it. Well, that's, they have a right not to like it. Maybe they're into romance books and you wrote a horror book and they're whatever, but don't dwell on that one bad review. Dwell on those 19 positive reviews.
Absolutely. Because 19 positive reviews are not easy to get. So if you're in that range, you're doing fantastic. I think it's great. Well, as you know, I like to kind of close out each show just with pulling a few cards. I'd like to ask too, based on our conversation today, I love that you really delved into the editing and how that's different, because I think that's a big confusion point for a lot of authors, and not realizing that you're going to have to go through multiple rounds of editing. It just makes your book stronger. And quite frankly, particularly if you're doing a nonfiction book, if you've got a business or a platform that you're trying to promote, I think it's really important that you are putting your best foot forward. And that does include editing. So, we want your book to be great, not just good.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, people say the two most important, at least for self-publishing and even hybrid publishing, the two things you should not skimp on when it comes to investing is your book cover and your editing.
I
Those
totally
are the
agree.
two main things that you got to really worry about. Your interior design, you can get away with some things. The marketing, that could go either way depending on who you might hire to kind of help you get the sales out there. But the book cover, I mean, don't judge a book by its cover is not true, because everyone does that. You see that cover, oh, let me look at this. And then they flip it over to the back. That's part of your book cover. Make sure you got stuff on there that makes them open the book.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of people don't realize how important that cover is. It is your marketing piece to sell books or to promote your platform, your business, your consulting, whatever you're doing. So I think that's really important. Yeah, that's
What
awesome.
spinach is to Popeye.
Exactly. I love that. Okay, so let's pull some cards. Let's see what our listeners are supposed to know. So here, the first card is a 32. So 3 plus 2 reduces to a 5. 5 is the number of change. So that just means that be prepared, because there are changes coming. Now, I'm getting to changes within the publishing industry, but also a change for you if you are listening to this and you're thinking about embarking on publishing your book, whether it's a legacy book, fiction, nonfiction, just take the next step, right? Just take the next step. And the card itself is here and now. And you can see she's sitting on an egg. So the egg represents the birth of new ideas, creation, fertility. And because she's in the present, so that this is like past and future, she's here and now, she's in the present. When you are present with yourself, the doors will open. The doors will open for creativity. So it's just saying, just get present, get grounded, tell your story. Like, that's the most important thing. And then the next card is a 2. This 2 is yin card. So it's the yin and yang, the masculine and feminine. This is the feminine of receiving. So for our authors listening, the message I'm really getting from this is to have your heart open and be ready to receive, because I feel like if you are thinking about publishing a book, and again, I'm really getting this family heritage kind of thing around legacy books, there are gifts that are coming your way that you can receive by kind of embarking on this journey and telling your family's history. Oh my gosh. And I just said a little while ago, it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. We got a 47 card. So 47 reduces to 11. 11 is the number of, it's really of destiny, fate, right? And the card is go the distance. So you can see this is the cheetah. Wow. The cheetah will go fast when he needs to go fast, but really cheetahs can run for a long time. So this is saying you have a finish line to get to. So you've got to go the distance. It's not a sprint. If you're really wanting to publish and do it the right way, you're going to be in it for a while. It's going to probably take you close to a year. Now, the good thing is that with independent publishing or hybrid publishing, it usually takes you less time than if you were to go with a traditional publisher, which can take you like upwards of 3 years. But so that's really the message today, is just get grounded, get present. Go ahead and step into the receiving energy of, okay, show me the guidance to write this book and put it out there, and then just stick with it, because it's not going to be a quick one and done like you used to do. Just like slap it together and put it up on Amazon. You got to be dedicated to this process, because the result is that you'll be much happier with a book and the result of that. Yeah. What do you think?
I think absolutely. It's definitely getting that first draft just out of your head, so then you have space in your head for the rest of the process and the story's not eating away at you. And I've had people, and I know you and I actually just had a call last week with someone. They're like, I've written and taken the story as far as I can. Now I kind of need help. I need help
Yes.
getting it to the finish line. And that's just that's part exhaustion. That's part of the excitement, and the motivation is lost because they're realizing, man, this is a task to write a book.
Yeah,
It's not just anyone could wake up and go for a walk in the park, but this is something very different.
Yeah.
And it's just good to have people such as yourself, such as me, my team, and plenty of other people out there that this is what we do. This is what we've been doing. So
Yeah.
you're on your first book. Guess what? We're on like our 350th book.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think you're right. Like, understanding when in the writing process it's time to go, okay, I think I need help, whether it's ghostwriting services, editing services, wherever you're like, okay, I think I've come as far as I can go, and now I need some support.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I've heard people say the comparison of, if I need my transmission fixed on my car, You know what? I could probably climb under there, drop my transmission and mess around, but I'm probably never going to get it back up the right way so that it works. So what do? I get my car to a transmission shop garage where they put it up, they do it, they fix it, it comes back to me. Why? Because they're the experts at it.
Yes.
And that's all we are. We are experts. And one other thing, a lot of people, we didn't really talk a lot about ghostwriting, but I've had people say, oh, that's cheating. And how would you want to write a book and not have your name on it?
Right.
And I say, do you realize how much stuff is done by other people where their names aren't on it, especially the music industry? Frank Sinatra never wrote a single song, not a single lyric. It was all written for him, music and lyrics. Elvis Presley only co-wrote 2 songs.
Yeah.
It's just amazing. Like, you look at people in Congress and they're giving speeches all the time. They don't write all those speeches. They hire people to do it. So there's a ton of things that go on behind the scenes. You're just seeing the face of what's presenting it.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah. So get help when you need it. And Tim, how can people find you?
On LinkedIn for sure. So you could just Google Tim Jacobs and hopefully I pop up. And my email is tjacobs@jacobswc.com.
Okay, awesome. And do you have a website?
Yes, the website is jacobswc.com.
Perfect. Okay, good. So if you're thinking about doing a legacy book, if you need ghostwriting services, if you need any kind of assistance in the realm of what Tim offers, please reach out to him because he's fantastic to work with him. I can't even count how many books we've worked on together now. So yeah, it's awesome. I love it. Any final words, Tim?
Not that I could think of. Just thank you very much for having me on Finish the Damn Book podcast. I look forward to this airing and blasting it out there.
Thank you so much for being here. And if you found this interesting, I encourage you to join me for the next episode and be sure to subscribe. Each week, one lucky listener who subscribes and posts a review on Apple Podcasts or iTunes will be entered into a drawing for the grand prize, a private VIP day with me, valued at $25,000. So be sure to subscribe and post a review. And until then, keep on writing so you can finish the damn book. We'll see you next time.
So that's it for today's episode of Finish the Damn Book. Head on over to wherever you listen to podcasts and subscribe to the show. One lucky listener every single week that posts a review on Apple Podcasts or iTunes will win a chance in the grand prize drawing to win a $25,000 value private VIP day with Susan herself. Head on over to finishthedamnbookpodcast.com and pick up a free copy of Susan's gift. And join us on the next episode.